go into Exodus, and I truly believe that you will be impacted by the Word of God tonight. I truly believe that God had a plan for all of this because it works perfectly in the timetable of what we are in right now. Today would be recognized as what day? Palm Sunday, okay? So the triumphant entry, and then getting into this week, there's a lot that happens in dealing with what Jesus did in his last few days. And then you get to the crucifixion, the Last Supper. You get to all of what happens, and we're actually going to see part of the picture of that here this evening as we deal with the last plague. So I hope you can grab a connection, grasp the connection from Old Testament to the New Testament tonight, and the picture that God gives long before Jesus becomes man and is put on the cross. So I entitled this "Freedom's Cost," and I think you would understand that freedom does cost. Even in the excitement of understanding what freedom is, even as America gained its independence, there was excitement that was had, but there's also the thought process of who sacrificed in order to gain that freedom. You got to think about that. How many sons were lost? How many fathers, grandfathers? How many pastors? How many very vital leaders in the community? Whatever that might be, how many gave and took the reality of sacrifice and said, hey, it's worth it because we want freedom. Now, tonight, as we experience this plague, so many times I get excited about finally Israel is free. But I don't pause long enough to understand what it took for Israel to be free, and then understand the purpose behind why Israel is free. And so as we run through and understand Israel gaining their identity as God's people, we understand here tonight that there's a lot that is entailed. So I hope that you're able to grasp that as we start in chapter 11. Here we'll see the announcement. Okay, in chapter 11, we'll start there in verse number 1. And it says, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Yet will I bring one plague more upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterwards he will let you go hence. When he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out hence altogether." So finally, in this last plague, God gives the surety that Moses would actually be thrust out. Can you imagine the picture behind that? Pharaoh, after all of his reluctance, after all of his clinching onto his kingdom, finally, he's going to want to kick you out of Egypt. It's going to be a total turn into what has been happening. Verse 2, "Speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold." Really? So we want to add more to our burden as we escape Egypt. Did you ever think about that? All right. More to carry when they really don't have a whole lot to carry it with. But as you go on, verse number 3, "And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians." What? "Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people." Can you imagine that? A man who you would see as the instigator of the disrepair, the destruction of the empire of Egypt. The man who would announce plague after plague after plague. And as you watched your people deal with frogs and flies and disease, and you lost your cattle, and you lost all this darkness, so dark that you could feel it for 3 days, all of this, and they looked upon Moses and the Israelites with favor. They saw light, difference. This must be God's people. But as you move forward here, even Pharaoh's people, his people and his servants are turning to the side of Moses and the people of God. Verse 4, and Moses said, "Thus saith the Lord, about midnight will I go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die." This was prophesied earlier, as God had stated back in Exodus, I believe it was chapter 4, where he says that Israel is my firstborn. You need to let Israel go, and if you don't, I will take your firstborn, Pharaoh. And here it is. He's laying it out. This is the announcement. All the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts. Everybody is going to be affected. Everything is going to be affected. Can you imagine? In that moment, every single firstborn gone. Even amongst the beasts, amongst the animals, just gone. No understanding except for the power of God as he announces this. You've also got to think and put it into perspective in these cultures back then. I mean, the hope of the family was instilled in the firstborn. Primarily, the inheritance was given to the firstborn. The name was carried on through the firstborn. This was important, and yet the hopes in one night would be destroyed by God. This is the announcement. Verse number 6, and there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it any more. But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against any man or beast. Israel will not be affected. They will be saved. That ye may know how that the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. I'd stated this in the beginning, where in Exodus we see that Moses has struggled with his identity, and all of a sudden God is bringing that back to him. But as a follower of God and a leader of God's people, all of a sudden we see God's people actually gaining this identity. Whereas there's a difference where they've been mixed into Egypt, all of a sudden they see, hey, we're different. We're God's people. God's on our side. He's got our backs. There's a difference here, and it's because of the power of God. But Egypt, they're going to get it. They're going to get it. In verse number 8, and all these thy servants shall come down unto me and bow down themselves unto me, saying, get thee out, and all the people that follow thee. And after that I will go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in a great anger. So even the people of Egypt, instead of bowing down to what was their God, Pharaoh, they bow down to Moses. Say, get out. Go. Verse 9, and the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. There is going to be a finalization of this. The Pharaoh has not hearkened to this point. This 10th plague needs to be seen. Verse number 10, and Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he would not let the children of the Israel go out of his land. So here's the announcement. Here's what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen. You've probably heard this quite a few times if you've been in Sunday school growing up. We understand what the 10th plague is, and it is very, very destructive. So here we jump into some actual instructions in the initiation of what we see as the Passover in the next chapter. So jumping over into 12, we see the instructions and the initiation. The instructions and the initiation. Now, there's a lot of details in here that you don't need to go away understanding every single facet of what's going on here, but I want you to grasp the big picture, okay? So starting in verse number 1, it says, and the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Can you imagine if our government decided to show up and put in a press conference and say, listen, we're going to change the entire calendar. This day, today, the start of this month is going to be the beginning of the year. This is going to be so important. I want you to understand this is what you base the rest of the year off of. This is something I want to get your attention with. It should draw you to it right here. Verse number 2, we see in verse number 3, speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of the fathers, a lamb for an house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make you count for the lamb. Verse 5, your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. Now, what I want you to understand here, he is setting up something for the future. They're not going to do it exactly as you see it here, because you'll actually see that this is going to happen so quickly. They're not going to be able to wait for the 10th day and the 14th day. They're going to need to jump into this right away and dealing with the lamb. But this is something that they're going to have to hold on to every single year. They're going to come back and they're going to practice what is happening in these verses. And so they're supposed to grab this lamb. It's supposed to be for each family unit. If you're Miles and you're coming in here, do I sacrifice one lamb just for me? No, he can actually extend it to some others to where it covers several other, it could be extended relatives, what have you. There could be whatever signifies an entire lamb. You're going to have a 1-year-old lamb that is without blemish. It is perfect. You're going to separate it from the flock, and something is going to happen to this lamb. You're going to kill it. Wait, hold on. You want me to separate a perfect lamb from the rest of the flock, take care of it, and in my mind, if I'm going to take care of this flock, I'm not going to have it it's not going to be out in the barnyard. I'm going to have it as close to me as possible, because if it has to be perfect, I got to care for it. I got to make sure it's clean. I got to make sure everything is in good standing. So where would you bring a lamb where you got to take care of it and make sure nothing happens? Inside the house? Where your kids are? Where they get to hang out with the lamb? Hold on for a second. Have you ever brought a new puppy home? You know how many things you just let go because, oh, the puppy's so cute. It's okay. We'll just deal with it. Everybody wants to cuddle with it. Even the dad who says, I don't want to bring this into my house. All of a sudden, he's the one sleeping on his lazy boy with the puppy, right? All of a sudden, there is this relationship, in essence, built. This care for, this special care for this one animal, taking care of it, making sure nothing happens to it, making sure nothing bad happens. Why? So in 4 days, it's sacrificed. Oh. Whoa. Why is that? We'll get there. Verse number 7, and they shall take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper door posts of their houses, wherein they shall eat it. We're not only going to sacrifice this lamb, we're going to take the lamb's blood and we're going to apply it to the doorposts. So this is pretty crazy. By the way, this is not the application that you go home with tonight. You do not go home and kill a lamb and apply it to your doorposts. You will be on Taylorville Anonymous very quickly, okay? You don't want to be on there. But as they go on, it says, they shall take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper doorposts of the houses wherein they shall eat it, and they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire his head with his legs, and with the purtenance thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning. And that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. So you're going to eat whatever you can. Whatever you can't, it's going to be consumed with fire. Take the blood, apply it. Verse number 11, and thus shall ye eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. What's he saying? This is going to happen so quickly, I want you to be ready to move. I want you to get your shoes on. I want you to put your belt on. I want you to be ready to go. Get your staff. It is time to leave. Have you ever been there with your family where you say, it's time to go, let's go? Oh yeah, everybody has to get their shoes on. Oh, wait a minute, we forgot to turn off the curling iron. Oh, and then the list goes on and on and on and on. Have you ever been there? And thinking, are we going to ever leave? Are we going to ever leave? Has anybody just sat down and taken off your shoes and your coat and you're like, I'm never going to leave, so why even get ready to go? God is stating, get ready to go. It's time to move. After all these plagues, who would have the faith to get ready to move? I mean, this is the boy that cried wolf, right? I mean, you've responded, and nothing's happened yet. Am I going to put my faith in doing this crazy situation of sacrificing this lamb for my family and applying the blood to the doorposts and getting ready to go? Am I going to be able to do this? This would take a high level of faith from the Israelite people to get ready to go. Verse 12, for I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. Why have I continually brought to you the false gods that the Egyptians hold on to and worship in relation to the plagues that were sent? Because this is the culmination where God is saying, listen, any God that you've raised up, that you've imagined into this powerful position of authority, they will be judged. There is no power on this earth that can stand against God. God is going to judge. Because he says, who's the Lord? He is. He's the Lord. He's in power. He is God. Verse 13, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. All of a sudden, some of you started singing that song in your head. When I see the blood, right? When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. Rest assured, people, Israel, all this chaos is going to be happening to Egypt, but you can be ready in peace. Verse 14, and this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. 15, 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread. Even the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your houses, for whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. 16, and in the first day there shall be an holy convocation. There's an assembly, a holy assembly. And in the seventh day there shall be an holy convocation to you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat, that only may be done of you. So it is a day of rest, of coming together. There's no work that's going to be done. You're going to be focusing on what we need to be focusing on. If it's a holy assembly, it needs to be focusing on the Holy One. Verse 17, and ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day and your generations by an ordinance forever. This is going to continue over and over and over again. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at even, ye shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even. 7 days shall be there no leaven found in your houses, for whosoever eateth that which is leavened, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be a stranger or born in the land. Ye shall eat nothing leavened. In all your habitations shall ye eat unleavened bread. This was a standard that God had placed upon them. You can't even have it in your house. That is the extreme that he's taken it to. And it is expected. And if you don't follow suit, you get cast out. There's a separation. He wants this to be serious. Verse 21, then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover. And ye shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 side posts with the blood that is in the basin, and none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning. You will stay inside. That would be really difficult, especially for those of you who heard sirens on Friday evening and you went out and stood on your front porch. Some of you ran to the basement. Can you imagine you and your family huddled together, and all of a sudden different families are realizing that they've just lost their firstborn? Listen, it's not just the child. It could be the dad that was the firstborn. Can you imagine how fearful the Egyptians would be, and the mass amount of response and fear and emotional trauma that is going to happen? And yet here, I want you to trust me, apply the blood, stay in your home. What if all of a sudden I heard cries a couple doors down? Now, some of you live close enough to family members that you might want to open the door and run over there to see what's going on. Did it happen to them? Did I just lose someone? Or am I just going to trust God? Trust God and live out the night. There's a lot that's going on here. Verse 23, for the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the 2 side posts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you. And ye shall observe this saying for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever, this Passover. And it shall come to pass when ye be come to the land which the Lord will give you, according as he hath promised, that ye shall keep this service. Even when you get to the land flowing with milk and honey, even when you're going to think everything's good, even when you think that everything is going wrong, you're going to continue to keep up with this tradition, this feast, this ordinance that he's placed in with his people. Verse 26, and it shall come to pass when your children shall say unto you, what mean ye by this service? Because you knew this was going to come up, right? The kid's going to ask, why are we doing this, Dad? Why would we take a lamb into our place of refuge and then sacrifice it? Why, Dad? You know how we normally respond to questions? With impatience and frustration and saying, because I said so. That's not how God responds here. He says that ye shall say it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed the head and worshipped. And the children of Israel went away and did as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. You see, when God is providing this avenue of remembrance, of memorial, of what he has done to save his people, to give them freedom, he wants them to consistently remember what is going on. And when the kids come in and say, why are we doing this? What's the point? Dad, mom can come in and say, listen, I'll tell you. Because this is a teachable moment. This is a discipleship opportunity. And I want you to believe in the reality of what God has done in our lives and what has done in our fathers' lives and our fathers' fathers' lives and generations upon generations before us, and what we trust he will do in generations upon generations after us, because this is what we're going to hold on to. Have you ever been asked questions before and you just said, because I said so? You ever wonder why there's so many generations, or the next generation is in so much rebellion to what the generation before it said to do? You want to know why? Because a lot of them weren't given a reason why. Why do we go to church? Because we have to. Why do we take the Lord's Supper, the communion? Why do we do that? Because it's just something we do. Why do we give? Because my mom told me I had to, so I just keep continuing to do it. I mean, why do we go to church? Because I told you we're going to church, and that means we're going to church no matter what. You get what I'm saying here? When questions are asked, we need to know why we do it. What's it for? And what can we do in these moments? We can bring it back to God, who instigated it in the first place. And if God didn't instigate it, it might be problematic to keep doing it. Right? In this moment, we've got to bring it back to teach the next generation. And it's not just our kids. Listen, we desire to reach our communities for the gospel. And all of a sudden, these new believers come in. Guess what? They're going to have questions. So why do you keep saying abortion's wrong? Because they're murderers. That's not a good answer. But you know, some respond with that. Why does God institute marriage as being between a man and a woman? Why do you hold on to that? Why don't you accept people saying, well, God made me this way. I'm no longer what I was biologically. I'm something different. And if we just respond in frustration and anger with, well, it's just the way that we've always done it. Do you think that those that we teach are going to believe these truths when we don't train and use the moments to disciple? This is what God has provided as an opportunity to say, hey, listen, I want you to remember who's in charge. I want you to remember who's given you this freedom. And guess what? There are some rules that I need you to hold on to, and some of them really don't make sense at the first. And they probably still won't make sense later on, but this is what I've instituted. And there's some pictures here that you're going to see the final fulfillment through the Genesis 3:15 prophecy that they've been waiting for from Genesis to Exodus, which is several hundred years, hundreds of years that's going from Genesis to Exodus that they're still waiting, saying, listen, hey, you're going to look forward and you're going to keep holding on to this, because guess what? Here's some of the things that we need to see. I brought in some New Testament passages here tonight that I wanted to present to you. The first one is 1 Corinthians 5:7. We see some of the links that are happening from the Old Testament to the New Testament. It's interesting how Paul uses this in dealing with the Corinthian church. It says, purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. See, there was this picture of leaven being like sin. There's this picture of sin. I want you to cleanse that out. This is exactly what he required them to do in order for preparation for the Passover. I want you to cleanse out any leaven. Anything that's going to be made is going to be unleavened bread. And then he goes even in the last part of this where we see the typology, the picture that's presented. For even Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. He is the picture of the lambs that were slain for the sakes of the Israelites back in Exodus. Something to look forward to. It was a shadow of things to come. You see in 1 Peter 1:19 it says, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. Again, the picture of that lamb that God had required, as in that animal that was required back in Exodus, is looking forward, it's foreshadowing what Jesus was going to be for all of us. You go into John 1:29, it says, the next day John seeth Jesus coming unto him and saith, behold, the what? The Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. Salvation comes in the form of a lamb. This is the same picture that was given back in Exodus. They would not only have to sacrifice to take that step, but they would have to apply that sacrifice to the doorpost. If they did not follow through, if they missed a step, death happened. If they wanted salvation, they had to follow God's plan, which in Exodus was looking forward to the New Testament. You see in Ephesians 1:7, in whom we have redemption through his blood. Why did Jesus have to die? Because his blood brings redemption. The forgiveness of sins according to the riches of his grace. You see here, and even in Luke 22:7-8, I think this is interesting, which connects even what we're dealing with in this week to what Jesus was dealing with back in Luke 22. It says, then came the day of unleavened bread, linking back to what they've been practicing since Exodus, when the Passover must be killed. And he sent Peter and John saying, go prepare us the Passover that we may eat. Jesus takes part in this right before he is able to give of his life. But you know, in passing of the bread and of the cup, what did he say? This is my body. This is my blood. It's for you. The foreshadowing. How important it is. But you know what's interesting? Even in all of this, the sacrifice back in Exodus was essential. It was mandatory. And so is the application of the blood. But you know what? The sacrifice of Jesus is essential and mandatory, but so is the application of his blood to our lives. And what does that require? Our faith in him. Our faith in him. We need to respond. Just a thought. Later in verse 37, it talks about, in Exodus chapter 12, it talks about how there was 600,000 men that left Egypt. 600,000 men. And that wasn't counting everyone else. How many lambs were sacrificed? If you were even to simplify that, and just in counting the men, if you were to divide that by 10, let's say one lamb for 10 people, 60,000 lambs. Can you imagine? That's just for the men. This was supposed to be for the entire family unit. Can you imagine what you would hear from all of those lambs dying? Say, man, this is tragic. This is hard to hear. What questions would come to your mind as you're listening to these lambs being sacrificed? Can we go back to that childlike questioning? Dad, what's going on? Why is this happening? Why is God requiring all of this? The application in turn comes back, the answer to that question is the fact that freedom costs. That lamb, that blood had to be shed to save your life. It costs. This freedom costs. Which brings it right back to Jesus in the picture that is there. Right back to Jesus. Freedom costs. Do we appreciate? Do we appreciate and live worthy of that cost? The sacrifice that has been made. We don't have time to cover the last part of the chapter, and that's okay because we know what happens. And if you don't, you get to read it tonight. But we understand that everything happened as God said it would. Every home in the Egyptian part of the country was affected with death. It says from Pharaoh's household all the way even into the jails. Death. Can you imagine being Pharaoh in this moment as he responds, as he finds his firstborn? Everything has been stripped from him. Every single thing, even his future, his legacy, it's all gone. And that's why he responds with, get out. The Israelites are ready to go. It's an immediate turn. They're getting out of the country. And you know the interesting factor you see in verse 38, it says, and a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle. Even in the midst of all of this, there were people that weren't even Israelites that joined the Exodus. How many Egyptians, I wonder, went along who saw that God is real? Who trusted in his power? How many other slaves were ready to go? And I want to be with these people. God has shown himself different in their lives. And all of a sudden, these peoples are coming together to come underneath what God sees as his people. Trust, faith. Do we respect the cost of what freedom requires?